What began as an ordinary day turned into a nightmare for 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan. Leanne, a well-behaved teenager from Leeds, was loved by her friends and family. She had a happy childhood despite her parents' divorce, living with her mother Sharon Hawkhead and her older sister Michelle. Leanne enjoyed spending time with her friends, attending church, and going shopping, typical activities for a teenager. On Sunday, November 26, 2000, Leanne woke up, had breakfast, and attended church with her family. She later met her friend Sarah for a shopping trip, a routine outing that ended tragically. After parting ways with Sarah around 5 p.m., Leanne took a shortcut through the woods to get home, a decision that would lead to her disappearance. When she failed to return home, her worried mother contacted the police, sparking one of the largest manhunts in West Yorkshire police history. Leanne's body was discovered 9 months later in Linley Woods, 12 miles from her home. The investigation revealed chilling details of her abduction and murder by John Taylor, a postal worker with a history of violent behavior. Taylor's arrest and subsequent trial uncovered his dark past and connections to other unsolved crimes, leaving a community in shock and a family devastated. The case of Leanne Tiernan is a haunting reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk in everyday life. Leanne Tiernan was born on September 27, 1984, in Leeds, United Kingdom. She grew up in a loving environment despite her parents' divorce. Living with her mother, Sharon Hawkhead, and her older sister Michelle, Leanne was described as a happy and well-cared-for child. She had a close-knit family that supported her in every aspect of her life. Leanne was a regular teenager who enjoyed spending time with her friends, attending church, and shopping. She was known for her good behavior and was well loved by those who knew her. Her interests included hanging out with friends, participating in church activities, and she was always eager to help her family. On the other side, John Taylor, born on August 27, 1956 in Leeds, had a far darker profile. Known in his community as the Pet Man because of his many pets, Taylor was outwardly seen as an ordinary postal worker. However, beneath this facade lay a history of abusive and violent behavior. Taylor was known to frequent the woods near his home, where he poached animals and exhibited cruel behavior towards them. He had been married but divorced in 1996, living alone in a cluttered house. His former partners described him as abusive, recounting incidents of physical assault and control. Taylor's hobbies included hunting and a disturbing interest in bondage, which he had forced upon several women he dated. Leanne's happy life was about to be shattered by a man with a dark past. Taylor's seemingly benign exterior hid his true nature, a predator with a history of violence and sadism. The intersection of their lives on that fateful day would reveal the depths of his depravity and the tragic loss of a bright young life. The contrast between Leanne's innocent joy and Taylor's hidden darkness set the stage for a heart-wrenching and shocking crime that left a community reeling. On Sunday, November 26, 2000, Leanne Tiernan started her day like any other. She woke up, had breakfast with her family, and attended church. After the service, she went to Sunday school before heading back home. Around noon, she called her friend Sarah Whitehouse, and they decided to go Christmas shopping in Leeds City Centre. Leanne left her house at 4:30 p.m., wearing her favorite Ales coat, black boots, and carrying her Christmas shopping list. She met Sarah, and together they boarded a bus. The girls spent the afternoon picking out gifts and enjoying each other's company. By 4:45 p.m., they had finished their shopping and boarded a bus to return home. The bus ride was uneventful, and they got off at Sarah's stop around 4:45 p.m. They decided to walk to Sarah's house, arriving around 5 p.m. The two friends chatted for a few minutes before Leanne said goodbye and headed towards her home, opting to take a shortcut through Holy Gill, a familiar wooded path she had used many times before. It was getting dark and the weather was cold, but Leanne felt confident she would be home soon. By 5:30 p.m., Leanne's mother began to worry when she didn't return home. She called Leanne's phone, but there was no answer. At 5:35 p.m., Sarah called Leanne's house to check if she had arrived, but she hadn't. This raised immediate concern. Sharon Hawkhead, Leanne's mother, continued to call her daughter's phone, but the calls went unanswered. At 7 p.m., panic set in, and Sharon contacted the police to report Leanne missing. The police responded quickly initiating a search operation that included combing the wooded path Leanne was supposed to take. They interviewed neighbors and friends, hoping for any clue that could lead them to the missing teenager. The community rallied together, with hundreds of volunteers joining the search. Police deployed dogs, helicopters, and used thermal imaging in an effort to locate Leanne. Despite their extensive efforts, there was no trace of her. The only lead was a report from a local woman who heard screams near the woods around the time Leanne would have been passing through. Little did they know, this seemingly safe shortcut would lead to a tragic end. As hours turned into days, hope began to wane, and the reality of a possible abduction set in. The search continued with renewed determination, but Leanne remained missing, leaving her family and friends in a state of anguish and fear. The emotional toll on her family was immense. Sharon Hawkhead, Leanne's mother, made numerous public appeals, her voice filled with desperation and sorrow. The community's sense of safety was shattered, and the fear that a predator was in their midst grew stronger. Despite the relentless search, Leanne was still missing, and the uncertainty was unbearable. As days turned into weeks, hope began to fade, but the determination to find Leanne and bring her home never wavered. On August 20th, 2001, 9 months after Leanne Tiernan's disappearance, a man walking his dogs in Linley Woods, North Yorkshire, made a chilling discovery. As his dog sniffed around a shallow hole, he noticed a large, suspicious package wrapped in multiple garbage bags. Alarmed, he immediately contacted the police. Upon arriving at the scene, the police carefully opened the bags and found the body of a young girl. The body was wrapped in 10 green garbage bags, tied with cable ties, and a dog collar was fastened around the neck. Her hands and feet were bound, and she was still wearing the clothes she had on when she disappeared, except for her coat and shoes. The body was remarkably well preserved, suggesting it had been stored in a freezer for most of the time she was missing. Forensic experts quickly confirmed the worst fears. The body was identified as Leanne Tiernan through DNA testing. Initial forensic examinations revealed signs of sexual assault and a slight singeing of her hair, indicating she might have been near a fire. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation with cable ties. The discovery sent shockwaves through Leeds and the surrounding areas. The community that had held out hope for Leanne's safe return was now plunged into grief and fear. The police, already under pressure, now faced the daunting task of finding the person responsible for this heinous crime. The careful manner in which Leanne's body was wrapped and preserved indicated a methodical and calculating killer. The forensic team found dog hairs and red carpet fibers on Leanne's body, which became crucial pieces of evidence. These details painted a grim picture of what Leanne had endured and pointed investigators towards a new line of inquiry. The once vibrant community now grappled with the reality that a cold-blooded killer had been in their midst. The discovery of Leanne's body was not just the end of the search, but the beginning of a complex and heartbreaking investigation. With the discovery of Leanne Tiernan's body, the investigation intensified. Forensic experts worked meticulously to analyze the evidence found at the scene. Dog hairs, red carpet fibers, and traces of other materials were carefully examined. The dog hairs were sent to a specialized lab in the USA, as there was no canine DNA testing available in the UK at that time. These hairs matched those from a dog owned by a local man named John Taylor. John Taylor, a 45-year-old postal worker, lived near the area where Leanne had disappeared. Known as the Pet Man due to his numerous animals, Taylor had a dark past filled with abusive behavior towards both people and animals. His former partners described him as controlling and violent, often using ropes and ties in disturbing ways. He had no prior convictions for major crimes, but his strange behavior had raised suspicions among those who knew him. The police searched Taylor's home, uncovering more incriminating evidence. They found the same type of garbage bags used to wrap Leanne's body, as well as red carpet fibers that matched those found on her clothing. A bundle of yellow cable ties, identical to those used to bind Leanne, was discovered in a drawer next to his bed. Moreover, a freezer in Taylor's backyard contained traces of Leanne's DNA, confirming that her body had been stored there. Taylor was arrested on October 16, 2001. During questioning, he initially denied any involvement, claiming he didn't even own a dog. However, the overwhelming evidence left him with little room to maneuver. He eventually confessed to kidnapping and killing Leanne, but claimed her death was accidental. According to his story, he had grabbed her by the neck with a leash, and when she struggled, he panicked, bound her, and later found her dead. The police didn't believe his version of events. Forensic analysis showed that Leanne had been strangled with cable ties, not accidentally choked. Furthermore, the methodical way her body was wrapped and stored indicated a premeditated act. Taylor's previous behaviors and the evidence found in his home painted a clear picture of a calculated killer. The web of evidence was closing in on Taylor. Investigators linked him to other unsolved crimes in the area, including 2 rapes from the late 1980s. DNA from those cases matched Taylor's, adding to his list of heinous acts. The police worked tirelessly to build a solid case against him, ensuring that he would face justice for his actions. The trial revealed the full extent of Taylor's depravity. He was charged with Leanne's murder, and the court heard harrowing details of his crimes. The forensic evidence, combined with testimonies from former partners and experts, left no doubt about his guilt. Taylor was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 30 years before he could be considered for parole. The community, though relieved that the perpetrator was caught, remained haunted by the tragedy. Leanne's family found some solace in knowing that justice had been served, but the loss of their beloved daughter was a wound that would never fully heal. The investigation into John Taylor's crimes highlighted the dedication of the police and forensic teams, whose relentless pursuit of the truth ensured that a dangerous man was taken off the streets. John Taylor was arrested on October 16, 2001. At first, he denied any involvement in Leanne Tiernan's disappearance, claiming he didn't even own a dog. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Dog hairs, red carpet fibers, and the exact type of garbage bags found at the crime scene were all linked to Taylor. His attempt to deny the facts quickly fell apart under the weight of forensic evidence. Faced with irrefutable proof, Taylor eventually confessed to the crime. He claimed he had seen Leanne walking alone and decided to follow her. He grabbed her with a leash, and when she struggled, he panicked, bound her with cable ties, and took her to his home. Taylor insisted that her death was accidental, saying she hit her head during a struggle and he found her unresponsive. However, forensic analysis showed that Leanne had been strangled with cable ties, not accidentally choked. The trial began on July 8, 2002, at Leeds Crown Court. The prosecution presented a detailed account of Taylor's actions. They highlighted his methodical behavior, pointing out how he had wrapped Leanne's body in multiple garbage bags and stored it in a freezer. Forensic experts testified about the evidence found at Taylor's home, including Leanne's DNA in the freezer and the matching dog hairs and carpet fibers. Taylor's previous abusive behavior towards women also came to light. Former partners testified about his violent tendencies and how he used ropes and ties in disturbing ways. The prosecution argued that Taylor's actions were premeditated and that he had planned to kidnap and kill Leanne. The jury found Taylor guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years before he could be considered for parole. The judge described Taylor as a dangerous sexual sadist who posed a significant threat to society. The community, though relieved by the verdict, was left reeling from the tragedy. Leanne's family found some solace in the fact that justice had been served, but the loss of their beloved daughter was a wound that would never fully heal. Taylor's trial also brought to light his involvement in other unsolved crimes. DNA evidence linked him to 2 rapes in the late 1980s, adding to his list of heinous acts. The police continued to investigate his potential connections to other cold cases, ensuring that he would never harm anyone again. Justice was served, but the scars remained. Leanne Tiernan's case was a stark reminder of the hidden dangers in everyday life and the importance of community vigilance. The tireless efforts of the police and forensic teams ensured that a dangerous predator was taken off the streets, bringing some measure of peace to a grieving family and community. John Taylor's arrest and conviction for the murder of Leanne Tiernan opened the floodgates to uncovering his involvement in other heinous crimes. DNA evidence linked him to 2 unsolved rapes from the late 1980s. In October 1988, a 32-year-old woman was attacked while walking to collect her children from school. In March 1989, another woman was assaulted in her home. Both attacks involved Taylor using a mask and a knife to threaten his victims. The revelation of these crimes prompted police to reopen several cold cases. Taylor was suspected in the murders of Yvonne Fitt in 1992 and Rebecca Hall in 2001, among others. Although no concrete evidence directly linked him to these additional murders, the similarities in the modus operandi and Taylor's violent history made him a prime suspect. The police continued to investigate, hoping to bring closure to the families of other potential victims. Taylor's trial and conviction were a significant step towards justice, but they also highlighted the possibility that he might have been a serial predator long before Leanne's abduction. The ongoing investigations aim to uncover any additional crimes he might have committed and ensure he would never be released to harm anyone again. Currently, John Taylor is serving his life sentence at Wakefield Prison in West Yorkshire. His minimum term was set at 30 years, but the judge recommended against parole, given the severity of his crimes and the danger he posed to society. Taylor's imprisonment brought some measure of relief to the community, knowing that a dangerous predator was off the streets. The impact of Taylor's crimes on the community and Leanne's family was profound. While justice was served, the emotional scars remained. The case of Leanne Tiernan serves as a somber reminder of the hidden threats that can lurk in seemingly safe environments. It underscores the importance of vigilance, community support, and the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement agencies. Taylor's story is a chilling reminder of how one individual's actions can ripple through a community, leaving lasting pain and a call for justice. The efforts of the police, forensic teams, and the community ensured that Leanne's story was not forgotten, and her legacy continues to inspire a commitment to uncovering the truth and protecting the innocent. The case of Leanne Tiernan is a heartbreaking reminder of the hidden dangers in our world. A bright young girl with a loving family, her life was tragically cut short by a man with a dark and violent past. John Taylor's actions shattered a community and left a family in eternal grief. Yet, through the tireless efforts of the police and forensic teams, justice was served. Taylor's arrest and conviction ensured that he would never harm another innocent life. Leanne Tiernan's story will not be forgotten. It serves as a beacon, reminding us to cherish our loved ones and remain vigilant against those who may seek to harm them. The legacy of Leanne's life and the community's response to her tragic death continue to inspire a commitment to justice and safety. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe and share your thoughts. By spreading awareness, we can help prevent such tragedies and honor the memory of those we have lost. Thank you for watching and stay safe. Austin, Texas is known for its lively music scene and friendly community. But in December 2014, a series of terrible crimes shocked the city. On December 6, 2014, Cathy Blair, a well-loved choir director, was found dead in her home. 9 days later, on December 15, 2014, Sydney and Billy Shelton, an elderly couple, were found murdered in their home. These violent events left everyone wondering, what connects these seemingly unrelated victims? Cathy Blair was a 53-year-old music teacher. She moved to Austin to follow her passion for music. Cathy directed the Christian Choral Society, inspiring many with her talent and kindness. Her death was a shock to her family, friends, and students. Sydney Shelton, 85, and his wife, Billy, 83, had been married for 64 years. They were known for their hard work, kindness, and love for their family. Their sudden deaths left the community in mourning. These murders were brutal and seemed to be connected. Both homes showed signs of break-ins, and valuable items were missing. The similarities between the cases suggested a link, but the police had no clear suspects or evidence. The peaceful neighborhoods of Austin were now scenes of fear and grief. The police faced the challenge of solving these murders and bringing justice to the victims. As the investigation unfolded, a surprising lead would eventually help solve the case. What could have driven someone to commit such horrific acts? And how were these victims chosen? This is the story of a community shaken by violence and the search for the truth behind these tragic events. Cathy Blair was born on May 31, 1961, in Burbank, California. From a young age, she had a deep love for music. She moved to Austin to pursue her passion and earned a master's degree in vocal performance from the University of Texas. Cathy dedicated her life to teaching music and became the director of the Christian Choral Society in Austin. For over 2 decades, she inspired her students with her talent and kindness. Cathy was not just a teacher, she was a mentor and a friend to many. Her students looked up to her and cherished the guidance she provided. She had a way of making everyone feel special and believed in their potential. Cathy's dedication extended beyond the classroom. She often organized community events and performances, bringing people together through the power of music. Her personal life, however, was not without challenges. Cathy was twice divorced and worked hard to support her family. Despite these difficulties, she remained a loving and devoted mother to her children. Her tragic death on December 6, 2014, left a void in the lives of those who knew her. The community mourned the loss of a beloved figure who had touched so many lives with her music and compassion. Sidney Shelton was born on September 12, 1929, and his wife Billie was born on March 4, 1931. They were married for 64 years and had a life filled with love and dedication. Sidney and Billie were known for their kindness and generosity. They had 3 children and several grandchildren, and their home was always open to family and friends. Sidney worked as a carpenter, and Billie was a homemaker. Together, they built a life centered around family and community. They were active members of their church and participated in various local events. The Sheltons were loved by their neighbors, who often described them as the heart of the community. On December 15, 2014, their lives were tragically cut short. The news of their brutal murder shocked everyone who knew them. Sidney and Billie were found beaten and strangled in their home, a place where they should have been safe. The community struggled to comprehend the loss of such kind and gentle people. Their deaths left a deep impact on the neighborhood. Friends and family remembered the Sheltons for their unwavering love and support. They were a couple who exemplified what it meant to be devoted to each other and their community. The tragedy of their passing was felt by all who had the privilege of knowing Sidney and Billie Shelton. On December 6, 2014, Cathy Blair's son, Joe Hargis, returned home to a horrifying scene. Cathy was found in her bedroom, lying in a pool of blood. She had been strangled, stabbed multiple times, and her neck was slashed. The violent attack showed signs of a struggle. The police arrived quickly and began their investigation. They found Cathy's jewelry box on the floor with its contents scattered. Drawers had been opened and emptied, suggesting a robbery. Blood was found on the light switch and drawers, indicating the attacker moved around after the killing. Despite the chaotic scene, there were no clear fingerprints or DNA evidence left behind. The meticulous nature of the crime suggested it was carefully planned to avoid leaving traces. Investigators faced a challenging case with few immediate clues. Cathy's murder left her family, friends, and the community in shock and fear. On December 15, 2014, Nurse Dow Coachella arrived at the home of Sidney and Billie Shelton for a routine visit. She found the front door broken and entered cautiously. Inside, she discovered the elderly couple in their bedroom, both beaten and strangled. Billie had also been stabbed in the face multiple times. The crime scene was eerily similar to Cathy Blair's. The Sheltons' jewelry boxes were emptied, and drawers were pulled out and stacked neatly. This suggested that the same person might be responsible for both attacks. The brutality and methodical nature of the crime shocked the investigators. Like Cathy's case, there were no immediate suspects or clear evidence. The similarities between the two scenes led the police to believe they were dealing with a serial killer. The community was now in a state of panic, fearing for their safety and desperate for answers. Tim Parlin became a key suspect in the investigation. Born on January 5, 1964, Tim had a long history of criminal activity, particularly involving theft and burglary. He had spent several years in prison for stealing jewelry and other valuables. Despite his criminal background, Tim managed to find work as a handyman, offering his services to various households in Austin. Tim's connection to Cathy Blair came to light during the investigation. In the spring of 2014, Cathy had hired Tim to perform some yard work at her home. Neighbors described him as a solitary and unfriendly man, which made his presence noticeable. Cathy mentioned to a friend that she found Tim creepy, but she still allowed him to work on her property. This connection drew the attention of the police, who began to dig deeper into Tim's background and activities. On December 6, 2014, the day of Cathy's murder, Tim's whereabouts were initially unclear. However, further investigation revealed that Tim had pawned a piece of jewelry that belonged to Cathy on the same day she was killed. This discovery made him a prime suspect. The police needed to gather more evidence to build a solid case against him. Sean Gant Benalcazar, born on February 14, 1984, was an unexpected addition to the list of suspects. Sean had no prior criminal record and was a high school science teacher with a degree in microbiology. He lived in Galveston, Texas, and had a reputation as a responsible and law-abiding citizen. His connection to Tim Parlin, however, would place him under intense scrutiny. Sean's sister started dating Tim Parlin's nephew, which led to Sean meeting Tim a few months before the murders. Despite their different backgrounds, the two men formed an unlikely acquaintance. On December 6, 2014, Sean was in Austin visiting his sister and stayed with Tim during this time. This placed him in the vicinity of Cathy Blair's murder. When the police questioned Tim Parlin about his involvement in the murders, Tim pointed to Sean as the person who had actually committed the crime. Tim claimed that Sean had gone into Cathy's house while Tim waited outside. The police then turned their attention to Sean, whose clean record and respectable job made the accusations against him seem improbable. Nonetheless, the investigators had to follow this lead to uncover the truth. The investigation began to gather momentum as critical pieces of evidence emerged. The first significant clue was the pawnshop receipt found in Tim Parlin's possession. Dated December 6, 2014, it showed that Tim had pawned a pendant belonging to Cathy Blair on the day she was murdered. This receipt linked Tim directly to the crime. Another crucial piece of evidence was the thermal footage provided by Cathy's neighbor, Rob Leaf. The footage, recorded on the night of Cathy's murder, showed a car pulling up near her house and a person walking towards it. Although the footage did not reveal the person's identity or the car's license plate, it provided a starting point for the investigation. The car was identified as a green Toyota Camry, which matched the vehicle Tim was known to use. Additional evidence included bloodstains found in Tim Parlin's car. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Cathy Blair, further implicating Tim in the crime. These pieces of evidence began to form a clearer picture of the events surrounding Cathy's murder. Tim Parlin's trial began on March 1, 2018. The prosecution presented a strong case against him, focusing on the evidence gathered during the investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence was the pawnshop receipt. This receipt showed that Tim had pawned Cathy Blair's pendant on December 6, 2014, the day she was murdered. This directly linked him to the crime. The prosecution also presented the thermal footage recorded by Rob Leaf. The footage showed a car, matching Tim's green Toyota Camry, near Cathy's house on the night of the murder. While the footage did not show Tim's face, it provided a crucial connection between him and the crime scene. Forensic evidence was another critical part of the prosecution's case. Bloodstains found in Tim's car were confirmed to belong to Cathy Blair. This further implicated Tim in the murder. The prosecution argued that Tim had a history of stealing jewelry and that he targeted Cathy Blair for her valuables. Throughout the trial, Tim maintained his innocence, claiming that he was being framed. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. On March 20, 2018, the jury found Tim Parlin guilty of capital murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial of Sean Gant Benalcazar started on November 1, 2018. The prosecution focused on Sean's confession and his connection to Tim Parlin. They presented evidence showing that Sean was in Austin on December 6, 2014, the night Cathy Blair was murdered. One of the key moments in the trial was the presentation of Sean's partial confession. During his interrogation, Sean admitted to entering Cathy's house and being present during the struggle that led to her death. The prosecution argued that Sean's confession, combined with the forensic evidence, proved his guilt. The prosecution also presented the thermal footage and shoe print evidence. Sean's gait and shoe prints matched those seen in the footage near Cathy's house. This placed him at the crime scene and contradicted his earlier claims of staying in the car. The defense argued that Sean was coerced into confessing and that Tim Parlin was the real mastermind behind the murders. They claimed that Sean was a victim of manipulation and that his confession was made under duress. However, the jury found the evidence against Sean convincing. On November 20, 2018, the jury found Sean Gant Benalcazar guilty of Cathy Blair's murder. He was also sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought some closure to Cathy's family and friends, who had been seeking justice for her brutal death. The verdicts in the trials of Tim Parlin and Sean Gant Benalcazar had a profound impact on the community and the victims' families. Cathy Blair's family expressed relief that justice had been served. They remembered Cathy as a loving mother and an inspiring teacher who touched many lives with her music. Sydney and Billy Shelton's family also found some comfort in the verdicts. They spoke about the couple's kindness and the deep loss they felt. The community, which had been living in fear since the murders, began to feel a sense of safety and closure. Public reactions were mixed. Many were shocked that someone like Sean Gant Benalcazar, a high school science teacher with no prior criminal record, could be involved in such brutal crimes. Others focused on the importance of thorough police work and the role of evidence in solving the case. Community members organized memorials and events to honor the victims. These gatherings helped the community heal and remember the lives of Cathy Blair, Sydney Shelton, and Billy Shelton. The impact of their deaths would not be forgotten, but the verdicts provided a sense of justice and a step towards healing for everyone affected by the tragedy. The trials of Tim Parlin and Sean Gant Benalcazar brought justice for the brutal murders of Cathy Blair and the Shelton couple. On March 20, 2018, Tim Parlin was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His history of theft, connection to the crime scenes, and possession of Cathy Blair's stolen jewelry were crucial in securing his conviction. On November 20, 2018, Sean Gant Benalcazar was also found guilty of Cathy Blair's murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. His partial confession, presence at the crime scene, and forensic evidence tied him directly to the murder. The jury rejected the defense's claim that he was coerced into confessing. These verdicts were significant for the victims' families and the community. Justice was served, bringing a sense of closure to those affected by these horrific crimes. The diligent work of the police and prosecutors ensured that the perpetrators were held accountable, highlighting the importance of thorough investigations and the power of evidence. The murders of Cathy Blair, Sydney Shelton, and Billy Shelton left a lasting impact on the Austin community. The trials and convictions of their killers brought some measure of peace, but the memories of the victims continue to resonate deeply. Cathy Blair's legacy as a dedicated music teacher and loving mother lives on through her students and the community events she inspired. The Shelton couple, known for their kindness and devotion to family, are remembered fondly by neighbors and loved ones. Their tragic deaths remind us of the importance of community and the need to look out for one another. These cases also underscore the need for vigilance and the critical role of community members in solving crimes. The thermal footage provided by Rob Leaf was a turning point in the investigation, demonstrating how even small actions can have a significant impact. The community has come together to honor the victims and support their families. Memorials and events celebrate the lives of Cathy Blair, Sydney Shelton, and Billy Shelton, ensuring they are not forgotten. While the pain of their loss remains, the strength and resilience of the community serve as a testament to their enduring influence. Justice has been served, but the journey towards healing continues. On February 19, 1982, in the quiet suburban town of Brighton, New York, a horrific crime shocked the city. Cathy Krauseneck, a 29-year-old mother, was found brutally murdered in her own home. The discovery was made by her husband, James Krauseneck, when he returned from work in the late afternoon. Cathy's body was found in the bed they shared, with an axe lodged deeply into her head. The Krauseneck family had recently moved to Brighton for James's new job as an economist at Kodak. On that fateful day, James claimed to have left for work early in the morning. James returned home and was met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Upon entering the house, James immediately noticed something was wrong. The garage door was ajar, and a window between the garage and the house was broken. As he ventured inside, he found the lifeless body of his wife in their bed, an axe embedded in her head. Shocked and speechless, he hurriedly took his daughter to a neighbor's house to ensure her safety and called for help. The police arrived promptly and began their investigation. The crime scene presented a puzzling picture. There were no signs of forced entry apart from the broken window. Additionally, despite the appearance of a disturbed home, nothing of value was stolen, ruling out robbery as a motive. This gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Cathy Krauseneck's brutal murder and the mysterious circumstances surrounding it left the police and the community searching for answers. Over the next decades, this case would unfold into a complex investigation, leading to a controversial and debated conclusion. As we begin to unravel the events of that tragic day, the focus remains on the chilling and unresolved questions that continue to haunt those involved in the investigation and the lives it forever changed. On the afternoon of February 19, 1982, James Krauseneck entered the Brighton police station holding his 3-year-old daughter, Sarah. Her hands were smeared with blood, and James was visibly shaken. He reported that he had found his wife, Cathy, dead in their home. According to James, he had been at work all day at Kodak, where he worked as an economist. Cathy had planned to stay home with their daughter. James explained that he had left for work that morning. When he returned home, he immediately noticed something was wrong. He ventured inside, where he found Cathy lying in their bed with an axe embedded in her head. Overwhelmed by the sight, he was momentarily speechless. His priority was to ensure Sarah's safety, so he quickly took her to a neighbor's house and asked them to call the police. The police arrived shortly after receiving the call. The initial examination of the crime scene revealed no signs of forced entry, apart from the broken window. The axe used in the murder was found to be from the Krauseneck's garage. Strangely, there were no fingerprints on the weapon or anywhere else in the house, suggesting that the perpetrator had meticulously cleaned the entire scene. Despite the apparent disturbance in the house, nothing of value was taken. Valuables, including money and jewelry, were left untouched. Items like a tea set and silverware were found neatly arranged, which was unusual for a burglary. During the investigation, the police interviewed young Sarah. She told them she had seen a bad, colorful person in her parents' bed. It was likely her way of describing her mother, given the blood and the traumatic scene she had witnessed. This added a layer of complexity to the case, as it suggested that Sarah might have been present during or shortly after the murder. The lack of fingerprints, the staged appearance of the home, and the absence of any stolen items made the investigation challenging. The police began to gather information about the Krauseneck family and their background to find any possible leads. Friends and neighbors described James and Cathy as a perfect couple. Despite the initial portrayal of a happy family, the police dug deeper into their situation. They found a flyer in James's car that advertised solutions for family problems, indicating potential marital issues. James's colleagues at Kodak reported that he had been acting strangely at work and had problems due to his lack of skills. These revelations painted a different picture and raised suspicions about James's involvement in the crime. James Krauseneck provided a detailed account of his day to the police. He stated that he left their home at 6:30 a.m. on February 19, 1982, to go to his job at Kodak. According to James, Cathy was alive and well when he departed, planning to spend the day at home with their daughter Sarah. James described his routine at work, noting that it was a typical day without any unusual occurrences. Upon returning home around 5 p.m., James immediately sensed that something was wrong. The garage door was open, and the window between the garage and the house was broken. As he entered the house, he found the lifeless body of his wife in their bed, with an axe embedded in her head. Overcome with shock and fear, James's first instinct was to ensure the safety of their daughter, Sarah. He quickly took her to a neighbor's house and asked them to call the police. James was visibly distraught when he arrived at the police station with Sarah, her hands smeared with her mother's blood. James initially cooperated fully with the police investigation. He answered their questions and provided a detailed timeline of his day. His demeanor was one of shock and grief, and he appeared eager to help the authorities in any way he could. However, despite his cooperation, the police needed more information to rule him out as a suspect. A few days later, the police scheduled a second interrogation with James to gather more details and clarify some points from his initial statement. However, James did not show up for the appointment. Instead, he left the city to visit his parents. While this raised some suspicions, the police considered the possibility that James needed the support of his family during this traumatic time. The police eventually tracked James to his parents' home, where they conducted another interview. During this session, James provided blood and hair samples as part of the investigation. Although DNA testing was not available at the time, the samples were taken for potential future use. James continued to maintain his innocence and reiterated his account of the events on the day of the murder. 10 days after Cathy's death, James hired a lawyer. This move added another layer of complexity to the investigation. The presence of legal counsel meant that James's interactions with the police would now be more controlled and strategic. Despite this, James continued to assert his innocence and expressed a desire to see the real perpetrator brought to justice. Throughout this period, James's emotional state was closely observed by both the police and his neighbors. He appeared to be deeply affected by the loss of his wife, showing signs of distress and grief. However, his decision to leave town shortly after the murder and his subsequent actions raised questions among the investigators. These actions were scrutinized in the context of the case, as the police sought to determine whether they were consistent with the behavior of a grieving husband or if they suggested something more sinister. The initial stages of the investigation were marked by these conflicting impressions of James. On one hand, he was a cooperative and grieving husband, devastated by the loss of his wife. On the other hand, his actions and some aspects of his story raised suspicions that the police could not ignore. As the investigation progressed, these early impressions of James would continue to influence the direction of the case, shaping the perceptions of both the investigators and the public. The complexity of James's behavior and the circumstances surrounding Cathy's murder presented a significant challenge for the police. They needed to balance the emotional and psychological aspects of the case with the hard evidence they were gathering. This delicate balance would prove to be a central theme in the ongoing investigation, as the police worked to uncover the truth behind the tragic events of February 19, 1982. The initial forensic analysis of the crime scene provided some critical yet inconclusive information. The autopsy conducted shortly after Cathy Krauseneck's death indicated that she had died between 2:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. on February 19, 1982. This broad time frame left open the possibility that either James or an unknown assailant could have committed the crime. The medical examiner noted that Cathy had been struck with a single fatal blow to the head with an axe while she was in bed. At the time, forensic technology was limited. Deoxyribonucleic acid analysis, which is now a cornerstone of criminal investigations, was not available in 1982. As a result, investigators had to rely on more traditional methods of crime scene analysis. The absence of fingerprints on the murder weapon and throughout the house suggested that the killer had gone to great lengths to avoid leaving any traceable evidence. This meticulous cleaning pointed to a perpetrator who was either very cautious or familiar with forensic procedures. The lack of physical evidence, combined with the staged appearance of the crime scene, complicated the investigation. The police collected hair and blood samples from James Krauseneck, but without the ability to perform DNA testing, these samples provided limited immediate value. The crime scene itself, with its apparent lack of struggle and the orderly arrangement of household items, suggested that the crime had been carefully planned and executed. Years passed without significant progress in the case. It wasn't until 2015, when advancements in forensic science prompted a re-examination of the evidence, that new insights began to emerge. Dr. Michael Baden, a renowned forensic pathologist, was brought in to review the case. Dr. Baden's expertise and access to modern forensic techniques provided an opportunity to re-evaluate the circumstances surrounding Cathy's death. Dr. Baden conducted a thorough review of the original autopsy report and considered additional factors that had not been fully analyzed in 1982. One critical element he examined was the presence of an electric blanket on the bed where Cathy was found. The blanket had been turned on, and Dr. Baden theorized that this could have affected the estimation of the time of death. By taking into account the potential impact of the electric blanket on Cathy's body temperature, Dr. Baden concluded that Cathy likely died around 6:30 a.m. This new estimation of the time of death directly contradicted James's alibi, as he had claimed to have left the house at 6:30 a.m. Dr. Baden's analysis suggested that Cathy had been killed shortly before or around the time James was supposedly leaving for work. This crucial piece of evidence reignited suspicions about James's involvement in the murder. Dr. Baden's findings were based on the most current forensic techniques and methodologies available in 2015. He used advanced tools to reassess the state of Cathy's body and the conditions in the bedroom. His conclusions added a new layer of complexity to the case, challenging the initial assumptions made by the investigators in 1982. The reanalysis conducted by Dr. Baden was a significant development in the ongoing investigation. It provided a more precise time frame for Cathy's death and cast doubt on James's account of his activities on the morning of the murder. The updated forensic analysis prompted law enforcement to revisit other aspects of the case, including the original crime scene photos, witness statements, and previous leads that had been followed. Despite these advancements, the case remained challenging. The new findings needed to be corroborated with additional evidence to build a stronger case against James or to identify another potential suspect. The forensic re-examination underscored the importance of continuous advancements in science and technology in solving cold cases and highlighted the difficulties faced by investigators working with limited resources and information. As the investigation moved forward, the insights provided by Dr. Baden played a crucial role in shaping the subsequent legal proceedings. His expert testimony and the updated forensic analysis became key components in the efforts to finally resolve the mystery surrounding Cathy Krauseneck's tragic death. As the investigation into Cathy Krauseneck's murder progressed, suspicions began to mount against her husband, James. Initially, friends and neighbors had described James and Cathy as the quintessential couple. They had met in school, fallen in love, and married while attending college in 1974. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in 1978, adding joy to their lives. James started his career as a university teacher, which reflected his academic inclination and dedication to education. In 1981, the Krauseneck family relocated to Brighton, New York, after James secured a position as an economist at Kodak. The move was seen as a positive step for the family, offering new opportunities and stability. However, behind the facade of a perfect family, there were subtle signs of trouble. Friends noticed a change in Cathy's behavior about 6 months before her death. She became more reserved and seemed to be dealing with personal issues, although she did not confide in anyone about the specifics. The police investigation uncovered more details that cast doubt on James's portrayal of their family life. A flyer found in James's car advertised solutions for family problems, suggesting that there might have been underlying marital issues. This discovery, combined with reports from James's colleagues, painted a different picture. At work, James had been acting strangely and had problems due to his lack of skills, which could have added stress to his personal life. James's behavior after the murder also raised eyebrows. While he initially cooperated with the police, his actions soon became a point of concern. He missed a second interrogation and left the city to visit his parents. This decision was seen as suspicious by some, even though the police considered it a natural response to trauma. Furthermore, hiring a lawyer 10 days after Cathy's death made some question whether he had something to hide. Despite these suspicions, there was another potential suspect who complicated the case. Edward Larrabee, a convicted sex offender, lived near the Krausenecks at the time of Cathy's murder. Larrabee had a long criminal history, including multiple assaults on women. In 2014, shortly before his death in prison, Larrabee confessed to killing Cathy. However, his confession was filled with inconsistencies and false details, making it unreliable. For example, he described Cathy inaccurately and provided a timeline that didn't match the known facts of the case. Larrabee's confession was not entirely dismissed, but it did not provide the solid evidence needed to shift the focus away from James. The police had to consider all possibilities, including the chance that Larrabee might be using the confession to gain some form of advantage, as he had done with other crimes. This created a dilemma for the investigators, as they had to weigh the credibility of Larrabee's claims against the suspicious circumstances surrounding James. The investigation into Cathy's murder was further complicated by the community's divided opinions. Some believed James was innocent and a victim of unfortunate circumstances, while others were convinced of his guilt. This division was reflected in the ongoing efforts to gather more evidence and make a conclusive case. Despite the challenges, the police continued to explore every lead. They re-examined the crime scene, revisited witness statements, and looked for any additional evidence that could point to the true perpetrator. The involvement of a high-profile forensic pathologist like Dr. Michael Baden added credibility to the reanalysis of the case, but it also underscored the need for solid, corroborative evidence. As the years went by, the lack of definitive answers left the Krauseneck case shrouded in mystery. The investigators faced the daunting task of piecing together a coherent narrative from the fragmented evidence and conflicting testimonies. Each potential lead had to be scrutinized thoroughly, and every hypothesis needed to be tested against the available facts. James's life after Cathy's death continued to be scrutinized. In 1997, he met Sharon, and they married in 1999. Despite his trauma from Cathy's death, James and Sharon traveled across the country, trying to move forward while the investigation loomed in the background. Sharon stood by James, insisting on his innocence and supporting him through the ongoing legal battles. The complexities of the Krauseneck case highlighted the difficulties faced by law enforcement in solving cold cases. The investigation was a delicate balance of analyzing old evidence with new technologies, considering alternate theories, and navigating the legal and emotional intricacies involved. The persistent efforts of the investigators reflected their commitment to seeking justice for Cathy, despite the many obstacles they encountered. The case remained open, with investigators hoping that new breakthroughs in forensic science or fresh evidence would eventually lead to a resolution. In 2015, the investigation into Cathy Krauseneck's murder was reignited with the support of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Advancements in forensic science and a fresh perspective on the evidence brought new hope for solving this decades-old case. The renewed investigation aimed to review all the evidence collected over the years and re-examine the interviews conducted with key witnesses. One of the primary focuses of the renewed investigation was the timeline of Cathy's death. The original autopsy had placed her time of death between 2:30 a.m. and 9:30 a.m., but Dr. Michael Baden's reanalysis suggested she had likely died around 6:30 a.m. This crucial piece of information contradicted James's alibi and placed him at the scene during the likely time of the murder. Investigators meticulously reviewed the crime scene photos, forensic reports, and any new information that had come to light since the initial investigation. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources and expertise to the case. They re-examined the physical evidence using the latest forensic techniques, hoping to uncover new clues that had been missed previously. The team also conducted a comprehensive review of all interviews, looking for inconsistencies or details that might have been overlooked. In addition to the forensic re-examination, investigators also scrutinized James's behavior and actions before and after the murder. They analyzed his work records, personal life, and any potential motives that could explain why he might have committed the crime. This thorough review aimed to build a comprehensive picture of the events leading up to and following Cathy's death. The renewed investigation culminated in a grand jury indictment on November 8, 2019. James Krauseneck was charged with second-degree murder. This decision was based on the cumulative evidence pointing towards his involvement in the crime. Despite the indictment, James maintained his innocence and pleaded not guilty. He was released on bail while awaiting trial. The indictment brought a mix of relief and renewed anxiety to those connected to the case. For Cathy's family, it represented a step towards justice, even though it had taken nearly 4 decades. For James and his supporters, it was another chapter in a long and painful ordeal. The legal proceedings that followed were closely watched by the public, reflecting the enduring interest and controversy surrounding the case. James's decision to voluntarily go to the police on November 8, 2019, highlighted his continued insistence on his innocence. He cooperated with the authorities, but never admitted guilt. This stance was consistent with his behavior throughout the investigation, where he had always maintained that he had no involvement in his wife's murder. As the case moved towards trial, both the prosecution and defense prepared to present their arguments. The prosecution focused on the inconsistencies in James's statements, the forensic evidence suggesting he was present at the time of the murder, and the suspicious circumstances surrounding his actions. The defense, on the other hand, aimed to highlight the lack of direct evidence, the possible involvement of alternate suspects like Edward Larrabee, and the impact of the flawed initial investigation. The reopening of the case in 2015 and the subsequent indictment in 2019 marked significant milestones in the long pursuit of justice for Cathy Krauseneck. The legal process that followed was expected to finally bring clarity and resolution to a case that had haunted the Brighton community for decades. The renewed efforts by law enforcement underscored their commitment to solving the case, demonstrating the advancements in forensic science and the persistent quest for truth and justice. The legal proceedings in the case against James Krauseneck began with intense scrutiny from both the public and the media. The trial, which took place nearly 4 decades after Cathy Krauseneck's murder, was set to determine whether James was guilty of second-degree murder. The prosecution and defense prepared to present their arguments, each side hoping to sway the jury with their interpretation of the evidence. The prosecution's case centered around the idea that the crime scene had been meticulously staged to look like a burglary gone wrong. They argued that James's alibi did not hold up under closer examination, and that the timeline suggested by Dr. Michael Baden's forensic analysis placed James at the scene at the time of the murder. Prosecutors highlighted the lack of forced entry, the absence of fingerprints, and the staged appearance of the house as key indicators that the crime had been carefully planned. Prosecutors also emphasized the findings of the renewed investigation, particularly Dr. Baden's conclusion that Cathy likely died around 6:30 a.m., the same time James claimed to have left for work. This crucial piece of evidence was used to challenge James's account and suggest that he had the opportunity and motive to commit the crime. The prosecution presented a narrative in which James, facing marital and work-related stresses, killed his wife and then staged the scene to cover his tracks. The defense, on the other hand, focused on the lack of direct evidence linking James to the murder. They pointed out that no physical evidence, such as fingerprints or DNA, tied James to the crime. The defense also highlighted the confession of Edward Larrabee, the convicted sex offender who had lived near the Krausenecks and had confessed to the murder shortly before his death. While Larrabee's confession was inconsistent and unreliable, the defense argued that it introduced reasonable doubt about James's guilt. Key testimonies during the trial came from a range of witnesses, including family members, friends, and forensic experts. Cathy's family testified about her relationship with James, their life together, and any signs of trouble they might have noticed. Friends and neighbors provided additional context about the couple's life in Brighton, describing them as a seemingly happy family, but noting the changes in Cathy's behavior before her death. Forensic experts, including Dr. Michael Baden, took the stand to explain the forensic evidence and the conclusions drawn from it. Dr. Baden's testimony was crucial in establishing the estimated time of death and the implications it had for James's alibi. Other experts discussed the lack of physical evidence at the scene and the possibility that the crime had been staged to mislead investigators. The trial proceedings were intense, with both sides presenting compelling arguments. The prosecution focused on the forensic evidence and the inconsistencies in James's statements, while the defense aimed to create doubt by highlighting the absence of direct evidence and presenting alternate theories. After several weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. On the basis of the cumulative evidence and the arguments presented, James Krauseneck was found guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict was a significant moment in the case, bringing a sense of closure to some, but also sparking further debate among others. James was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The sentencing marked the end of a long and arduous journey for justice in the case of Cathy Krauseneck's murder. For Cathy's family, the verdict and sentencing brought a measure of justice and resolution, even though it had taken nearly 40 years to achieve. The trial and its outcome were closely followed by the public and the media. The case had drawn significant attention due to its complexity, the long passage of time, and the questions it raised about forensic science, legal procedures, and the nature of justice. The verdict was seen by many as a testament to the persistence of law enforcement and the advancements in forensic science that had made it possible to solve such an old case. James maintained his innocence throughout the trial and in the years that followed. His defense team filed appeals, arguing that the verdict was based on circumstantial evidence and that reasonable doubt had not been adequately considered. The appeals process continued, reflecting the ongoing legal battle and the divided opinions about James's guilt. The sentencing of James Krauseneck to 25 years to life in prison marked a pivotal moment in the long quest for justice for Cathy Krauseneck. It highlighted the challenges and complexities involved in solving cold cases and underscored the importance of forensic advancements and persistent investigative efforts. The case remains a poignant example of the impact of crime on families and communities and the enduring pursuit of truth and justice. The aftermath of the trial and the verdict in the case against James Krauseneck brought a mix of emotions and reactions from those involved and the public. Cathy's family expressed relief and a sense of justice finally being served after nearly 4 decades. They believed that the guilty verdict against James provided some measure of closure, even though the pain of losing Cathy could never be fully alleviated. On the other hand, James's supporters, including his daughter Sarah, firmly maintained his innocence. Sarah, who had been just 3 years old at the time of her mother's death, stood by her father throughout the trial and its aftermath. She believed that James had been wrongfully convicted and that the true perpetrator had not been brought to justice. This unwavering support from his daughter was a significant source of strength for James as he faced his prison sentence and the ongoing legal battles. James's new wife, Sharon, also played a crucial role in supporting him during this tumultuous period. Sharon and James had married in 1999, and despite the trauma of James's past and the shadow of Cathy's murder, they had built a life together. Throughout the trial and its aftermath, Sharon publicly defended James, insisting on his innocence and describing him as a kind and supportive husband. Her steadfast belief in his innocence added another layer of complexity to the public's perception of the case. The case and its outcome also had a significant impact on public opinion. The divided views on James's guilt reflected the broader uncertainties and questions that remained unanswered. Some members of the public saw the verdict as a triumph of justice, made possible by advancements in forensic science and the dedication of law enforcement. Others, however, were skeptical of the evidence and remained unconvinced of James's guilt, viewing the case as an example of the potential flaws and limitations of the legal system. The extensive media coverage of the case played a significant role in shaping public opinion. Major news outlets, including Dateline, featured detailed reports on the investigation, the trial, and the subsequent verdict. These media portrayals highlighted the dramatic elements of the case, from the brutal nature of Cathy's murder to the decades-long quest for justice. In 2021, the case gained further attention with the release of a Netflix movie inspired by the events surrounding Cathy's murder. The film dramatized the investigation and the trial, bringing the story to a wider audience and reigniting public interest in the case. The portrayal of the case in popular media contributed to the ongoing discussions and debates about the evidence, the verdict, and the broader implications for the criminal justice system. The appeals process continued as James and his legal team sought to overturn the conviction. They argued that the verdict was based on circumstantial evidence and that the prosecution had not proven James's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The appeals highlighted the complexities and challenges involved in adjudicating cold cases, where the passage of time can obscure evidence and complicate the search for truth. As the legal battles continued, the case of Cathy Krauseneck remained a poignant example of the enduring impact of violent crime on families and communities. It underscored the importance of advancements in forensic science and the persistence of law enforcement in seeking justice. At the same time, it also highlighted the potential for controversy and division when questions about guilt and innocence remain unresolved. The Krauseneck case, with its mix of personal tragedy, forensic intrigue, and legal drama, will likely continue to be a topic of discussion and analysis for years to come. It serves as a reminder of the complexities and challenges inherent in the pursuit of justice and the ways in which such cases can profoundly affect the lives of those involved. Thank you for joining us today as we explored the complex and enduring case of Cathy Krauseneck's murder. We hope this detailed look into the investigation, trial, and aftermath has provided a deeper understanding of the challenges faced in seeking justice. If you found this video informative and engaging, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might be interested. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified about our latest content. Your support helps us continue to bring you more true crime stories and in-depth analyses. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.